So let's do a Transformers finance video, and this is one that people have been showing me over the past 24 hours and want to get my take on it. And man, do I got a major take on it, because as someone who pays attention to the action figure world and everything that goes on with its finance and the secondary market and what's hot and what isn't, what goes up, what goes down, what is stuff that was once garbage is now all of a sudden extremely valuable. But I also pay attention to that of the comic book and the trading card market. And I'm seeing a lot of similar stuff that's been going on in the past month. And more specifically, what's been going on in the world with the big V and money being printed and a lot of weird stuff. And I'm going to get into what I'm talking about with all of that. But let's talk about this piece of news. So, Transformers Marvel, the beginning of all beginnings for Transformers in a lot of ways, even before that of the cartoon, fictionally. Transformers Marvel 1984, issue number 1 by Marvel Comics. A graded copy of the very first issue, graded being CGC, in 9.9, almost gem mint condition. It's almost impossible to pull that off with comic books. I could see it with cards, but comics is a whole other story. But almost near mint condition, gem mint, almost a 10, sold on the ComicLink action website for $44,000. Now, when this news came up, a lot of people contacted me, and I looked into it, and there's a lot of things I want to pick apart here from top to bottom. So number one, first of all, the item in question that sold was the direct-to-market version of Transformers number 1, which, I'll be honest with you, was not a rare comic book. Plenty of them out there. I know when I was starting to build my collection of Generation 1 Marvel comics, because when, I want to say it was about 97, 98, when I started to go, oh yeah, I want to try to get a complete set of these, issue number 1 was at most a $5 to $10 book Canadian, and was like a $5 to $3 book American. No one cared about it. There was tons of them out there. Combined with the fact that the one that is the direct market version, how you could tell the difference, which is the one that has the Spider-Man logo in the bottom left, that's the direct market version, went to comic book stores. And then you have the Newsstand version, which is the one that has the barcode. The Newsstand versions, or the barcode versions, are actually the rarer ones, and the ones that are much tougher to find in perfect condition, because they were on newsstands, they were on comic shelf spinning wheels and all that stuff. They were the ones that got flipped through. They were the ones that didn't go into a bag and a board directly, or was more taken care of like a comic book store would have handled it. Even in 1984, different animal completely. So the one that was sold here wasn't even the more rare version. Now, on top of all of that, now here's my criticism, and some people might not like this, but two things that I really want to punch a hole in here. Number one, it wasn't sold on eBay, it was sold on ComicLink. And ComicLink, while it does have a lot of crazy stuff on there, a lot of amazing, important comic books and comic book history that do deserve their auction sold value, does change hands on this website. But there is also recently, in the past 12 to 16 months since the big V, there's been a lot of manipulation and speculation of common 80s and literally printed to oblivion 90s product being fluffed up as valuable product. Just last month in the Marvel world, the legendary Impel Marvel trading cards. Remember those Marvel trading cards in the 90s? Well, that first series that was printed to oblivion, and even I personally have tons of it in my personal collection, because there was just a dime a dozen. Now this stuff is starting to get graded and put onto the market for exuberant money. Hundreds of dollars for some individual cards, thousands of dollars for others. It's getting ridiculous, and it's pretty much a whole bunch of private collectors, and again, they're going to hate me for saying this, but a whole bunch of private collectors buying and selling amongst each other to fluff up the value, get that, I guess we'll call it viral article written about it. And then they got a stack of Cosmic Spider-Man Impel trading cards that are ready to be graded and put out there. Combined with the fact that when this kind of news breaks, the big money is already made, because then what happens is a whole bunch of people flood the market with their graded, 9, 10 trading cards. And before you know it, that $1,000 retraces all the way back down to $200, $100, $50. All of a sudden, raw ones start showing up on eBay, and the market just gets flooded because most of those trading cards were sitting in books and in binders and bins and top loaders and boxes for years because they weren't worth anything. Let's get back to Transformers Optimus Prime cover here, number 1, CGC. Now, if you're someone like me, I have the direct market version, I have the Newsstand version, and I think I have even one just sitting around of the French version. And I never decided to get extras of them because it wasn't a valuable book. At most, in the secondary market, it was a novelty valuable book, meaning like people would want it just because it is number 1. But at the same time, it was like a $50 to $60 book when it reached that peak of popularity because of the 2009 Bay movies and stuff like that. But I've always said, in all honesty, the most valuable book of the original Marvel run isn't the first couple of issues, but actually the last couple of issues. Issues like 75 to 80 are going to cost you more than anything. That being said, this is ridiculous. I firmly believe, heavily so, that this was a little bit of market manipulation. It says here they had 90 bids, but I really feel that there's a little bit of messing around here because it's not eBay, it's ComicLink. And there's people that are sitting on stacks of this book. Now, keep in mind, my copy, I know for a fact my copy of the Newsstand one, if it was graded, I'd be lucky if I get maybe a 9.1, maybe, and I'm being nice. My direct-to-market one, pretty minty, but at the same time, it's probably not going to be a 9.9. They'll find some kind of flaw. But that being said, what's going to happen is now this news is out. You're going to have a ton of people that aren't even related to the Transformer fandom or just people that are comic book store owners where this stuff was sitting in their bins for years. And they're going to rush out and get this stuff graded. Now, will they get the 9.9? Who knows? You might even have a guy that has a 10 out there. Might be. But the market's going to get flooded with these now. And we're going to see what happens. But all I know is that this is silly. This is silly because there's millions of these out there. This isn't a rarity factor. And granted, this as much as this isn't a rarity factor, and the rarity comes more from the fact that the chances of finding a CGC 9.9 of Generation 1 Marvel Transformers issue number 1, even that, in my mind, isn't probably too impossible because there's so many of them kicking around. Again, I'm looking at my own personal one that's been sitting in a Mylar forever, and I'm going, you know what? I think I could pull off a 9.6. I mean, here's the crazy thing. I actually have CGC graded Transformer comics, but I bought them as a novelty. So I own I think people even saw it on some of my old YouTube videos way back in the day. I own Headmasters issue number 4 graded. I think it's 9.6 graded, and I only bought it because Hot Rod's on the cover. It was Hot Rod's first cover appearance in a Marvel Transformer comic. It was the Target Master Hot Rod thing going on. And I have that as a novelty. I have Transformers Armada number 1 graded 9.8. Why? Novelty. Some guy had it at a convention and he bought some stuff from my table and then he's like, "Are you willing to do a trade?" And he showed me a whole bunch of graded comics. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Why not? It's not worth anything, but why not? But this is what's happening is there's money being printed that is being distributed throughout the United States and Canada. People have this extra money and they want to park their money into investments that aren't the typical stock investments, so they want to put it into collectibles. And on the opposite side of that, there's a group of people that are going to take advantage of that and go, how could we manipulate the market and make money from this. And then they look at something that's just super common and go, if we could kind of pump this up, then we're going to have a huge inventory of it, and then we could, profit from it. If you've been sitting on a stack of like, imagine one of the most best-selling comic books of all time, if not the best-selling comic book of all time, if we don't count like the Golden Age and stuff like that, which they weren't really tracking them. But Jim Lee's X-Men #1, 1991. Millions of copies of it out there, millions of copies of it that were graded, millions of copies of it that are probably in 9.9 conditions on top of ratty ones. There's just so many of them out there. So common that I went to a free comic book day, I want to say like 3 years ago, and the owner of the store was giving away issues of it because he just had so many of them. But I could see that people could manipulate the market and then create some kind of, all it takes is an article, a blog, and a whole bunch of people, and then manipulating the bidding on a third-party non-eBay auction site. And before you know it, this dollar bin comic book that has a little bit of historical value, because again, best-selling comic book of all time, Jim Lee, an amazing artist, iconic characters from X-Men. All it takes is a little bit of market manipulation, and now all of a sudden, this dollar bin comic book could be $50, $100, $200, $300. The sky's the limit. And then you have these guys that have been sitting on cases of these. Now they've blown up their dollar book to, let's say even just to be nice, $100. They've made an insane profit. They've turned a dollar thing to $100. You can't ask for a stock like that, but they do it. And I saw it happen just literally months ago with the Marvel trading card world. Now I'm seeing this with the super common comic book world. And I think this is going to continue, and it's just a warning to people. Be careful at what's going on, because this kind of stuff I'm seeing all the time, where now stuff that's not worth anything. And when I mean not worth anything, I mean it's still like a $40 item or a $50 item, but for it to get blown up to such, 5-digit proportions, that's a manipulation at that point. I mean, you're taking something that historically was in a very mid-range kind of value and making it go through the roof, that it's a payment on a house or it's a car payment. You know what I mean? So it's something that, again, don't fall for the hype. There's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And at the end of the day, what's ironic is it's not even the rarest version of this first issue. If the Newsstand version was a 9.9, then I'd actually be more impressed, because that's the one that's tough to get in perfect condition, the one with the barcode. Anyways, I've talked enough about this. I just wanted to just cover it because so many people were messaging me about it, and it's perfect for the Transformer finance stuff that we always talk about. But just be careful about what's going on here. Just be careful. In the same way that I've seen in the past at TFCon, we've had guys that, I remember one guy had a booth, and it was just all mint in box graded, AFA graded G1 Transformers. And while there is a niche market for it, at the end of the day, it really is a lot of guys buying between each other and pumping up a market that really doesn't have an honest value in a lot of ways. And you have to be careful with that kind of stuff. So anyways, let me know what you think. It's nuts. How many people here, I'm curious, legit, how many people here that are listening to this podcast have this first issue, have the Spider-Man, direct-to-market version sitting in their collection and probably in immaculate condition too? And how many of you guys are now going like, well, damn, I got a mortgage payment on my hands right here. I got like a down payment for a house. Because I'm telling you, that's what's the weird thing that's going on here. And just to give you the honest opinion.